Hi guys, NAT gateways and NAT instances are two services and techniques that we can use to solve the problem of giving internet access to the instances that we have in our private subnets. So we're talking here about outbound internet access. We may not want people to connect to these instances directly from the internet, but we need them to connect to the internet so that they can do things like downloading software binaries or patches. So let's look at how we can do this. So we have an EC2 instance in a private subnet. So it has a private IP address only. So even if we have an internet gateway, it can't use the internet gateway. Now what we do is deploy a NAT gateway. The NAT gateway has both a private IP address and an elastic IP address, so that's a public IP address. Really important to realize that the NAT gateway is created in a public subnet, not in the private subnet. We then have our route table for the main subnet. So that means the public subnet. We have our public subnet associated with our main route table. Now it has a route to the internet gateway. That means the NAT gateway, using its elastic IP, can access the internet. But at this point, we don't have a way to access the NAT gateway for our EC2 instance. So we create a private route table and we add a route to any other IP address that points to the NAT gateway's ID. So remember that the NAT gateway ID must be specified in the private subnet route table. Then the instance is able to send internet traffic to the NAT gateway and it will forward it out to the internet, and it takes care of the network address translation for you. The other thing we can do is deploy something called a NAT instance. With a NAT instance, we have the same problem to solve. We've got an EC2 instance with a private IP. We've got an internet gateway, and now we deploy a EC2 instance into a public subnet. And we use a special Amazon machine image, AMI, that has this string in the name. So you can search for AMIs with AMZN-AMI-VPC-NAT in the name, and they're specially designed for this use case. Now this instance, because it's in a public subnet, will have a public or elastic IP address, and it will have a private IP address, as all instances do. Now you have to disable source destination checks on the network interfaces for the NAT instance. So that's something that's very important, and you can't do NAT forwarding unless you disable source destination checks for the instance. So now we have our main route table again, no changes there. Our private route table points to the NAT instance ID. And again, make sure this is in the private subnet route table. So you have the NAT instance, all the NAT gateways are always in the public subnets, and the route to the NAT gateway or NAT instance is always in the private subnets route table. And then the instance can access the internet via the NAT instance. So why do you use one over the other? Well, here's a bit of a table for you to help you understand the key differences between these two. Now, a NAT instance is really the old way of doing things. It's really where you're finding your own solution to the problem. Now, a NAT gateway is specially designed for this specific job, and it's also managed by AWS. So you're not managing the instance. With a NAT instance, you have to manage the operating system for your instance, and with a NAT gateway you don't. Now it's a lot more scalable as well. It has automatic high availability. It doesn't actually have its own security groups like a NAT instance, and you can't use it as a bastion host. So a bastion host is what we did in the previous hands-on lesson when we launched our EC2 instances, and we SSH'd into the public instance, and then we jumped from there to our private instance, and that's a bastion host or a jump host. And you can't do that with a NAT gateway, so you have to still deploy your own bastion hosts. With both, you can choose elastic IP addresses to associate. One limitation of a NAT gateway is it doesn't support port forwarding for some use cases, but for most use cases, a NAT gateway is going to be a better solution. Now you do pay for these, so just bear that in mind when we create a NAT gateway in our account. It will cost money if you leave it running for an extended period of time, so just use it for the lab and then remove it once we're finished. So that's it for the theory, and in the next lesson we're going to create a NAT gateway.